If you could ignore all of the theological, philosophical, historical, scientific, mathematical, and grammatical errors of the Quran, if you could ignore the fact that all of the rituals of Islam were picked up by Muhammad from the pagans, like a dog picks up fleas, if you could ignore all of Muhammad's convenient revelations in which his would-be deity rushed to justify and fulfill all of his devilish desires and perverted practices, if you could ignore the many commands in the Quran to fight and slay those who do not believe in Allah and refuse to render entire submission to Muhammad, if you could ignore all of that, then what would it take to convince you that Muhammad was a prophet of God? What kind of a sign would you expect to mark him out as God's last and greatest messenger? Perhaps you're thinking to yourself, if Muhammad, like the prophets of old, made verifiable predictions about the future, things that were impossible for him to guess in advance, then that would be a good indication that he spoke for God, since the true God is omniscient and knows the future. Or perhaps you're thinking to yourself, if Muhammad, like the prophets of old, performed signs and wonders, miraculous feats that could not be duplicated by natural means, then that would be a good indication that Muhammad spoke for God, since the true God is omnipotent and can do all his holy will. If that's the sort of thing you'd be expecting to identify Muhammad as a prophet, even the most excellent prophet ever seen, then you've got it all wrong, at least according to the teachings of Islam. After all, prophecies and miracles are the sorts of things that Christians point to as accrediting signs that verify the prophetic status of men like Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, all of whom made predictions about the future and did things like parting the Red Sea, calling down fire from heaven, and giving sight to the blind. But anyone could do that sort of thing, or at least it had all been done before, and so, as Muslims tell us, it is fitting that Muhammad would be sent with something greater, something Muslims call the seal of prophethood. According to Sheikh Yasser Qadi, this seal or sign given to Muhammad by Allah was a palpable something or other that could be found on Muhammad's body, and it served as conclusive proof that he was the last and greatest of all of Allah's prophets.
The Prophet ﷺ had a physical khatam, physical seal, a physical something that Allah gave him on his body, on his jasad. And this was to be a sign by which he would be recognized by other people. So the Prophet ﷺ had a physical sign, and this sign is the seal of the prophets.
Fortunately, we don't have to guess or wonder what this physical mark was, for Muhammad's early companions, not to mention some of his modern followers, didn't have the good sense to be embarrassed by it, and so they described it for us in all of its glorious detail. In the following hadith, we're told what this sign was that marked Muhammad out as the most excellent prophet ever seen. Jabir bin Samura reports that I saw the seal of prophethood of Rasulullah between his two shoulders, which was like a red tumor, the size of which was like that of a pigeon's egg.
Excellent, Basil. We've been trying for years to get a mole inside Dr. Evil's lair. We now have that mole.
Yes. Ah, and here he is.
So you're the...
Most excellent agent we've ever seen.
Yes, most excellent agent we've ever seen. Thank you.
In another hadith, we're told more about this egg-sized red tumor-like thing that Muhammad's companions were convinced was a proof of his prophethood. Abdullah bin Sarjas says, I came to Rasulullah while there were people sitting in his company. I went around to the back of Rasulullah. Rasulullah understood what I was trying to do. He removed the sheet, body wrap, from his back. I saw the place of the seal of prophethood between his two shoulders. It was like a cluster surrounded by till, moles, which appeared to be like a wart.
By the way, I realize that I have a large mole on my face.
Where? What? Where's that mole? I didn't see one.
For a final hadith among the many others that could be cited, we're told in the following hadith about one of Muhammad's companions named Abu Zayd, who once gave Muhammad a prophetic rub-down. Apparently, Muhammad's many wives and slave girls were not adequate to the task. As Abu Zayd was working his way down from Muhammad's back to his waist, he let his hands run wild and ended up touching some of the hairs that were growing out of Muhammad's moles. Ilba bin Ammar al-Yakhari says that the Sahabi Abu Zayd Amr bin Atab al-Ansari said to me, Rasulullah once asked me to massage his waist. When I began massaging the back, accidentally, by chance, my fingers touched the seal of prophethood. Ilba says, I asked Amr, what is the seal of prophethood? He replied, it was a collection of a few hairs.
So, I've been assigned to welcome you to the Ministry of Defense. I have a letter from my director personally thanking you for switching sides. I can't wait to inform Austin of your defection.
And so, as a sign to the world that Muhammad was Allah's last and greatest messenger, rather than put in his mouth prophetic utterances or enable him to perform awe-filled wonders, Allah gave him a greater sign, a red tumorous wart the size of a pigeon's egg surrounded by hairy moles.
I also realize the irony that I am myself a mole.
No one would make that connection.